Okay, this is just the exam guidelines to explain what you need to know about this content. You need to be able to explain relative prices, but only briefly. That's a long explanation or use any graphs or anything like that. And then the important bit is the demand and supply relationships. And you need to be able to explain that with the aid of graphs. And then the relationship between the product and the factor market, just the relationship between those two markets. Okay, so factor market, just to recap, that's where households sell their services or factors of production, the labor, capital, those things. And the goods market is where we buy the goods and services that have been manufactured. Relative prices. Absolute prices is what we pay for the actual product, so the price we see in the store. And relative prices is that the price of one good compared to another. So if we look at cars, for instance, Volkswagen is relatively cheap compared to BMW, but Volkswagen is relatively expensive compared to, let's say, a Datsun or a Tata. Okay, so it differs. It's how we compare with something else. And my relative prices is going to be different to your relative prices. Something that might be expensive for me might be cheap for you, or vice versa. And that is what causes markets to exist. So, demand and supply. The law of demand, if you still remember that, as price increases, demand decreases. So there's an inverse relationship. Law of supply, as the price increases, the supply also increases. Okay, somebody else is joining. Who's that? Ayanda, name? I know, Sinamusi. Okay. I think somebody else joined us. Let's just quickly recap. The law of demand, as price increase, demand decrease. Law of supply, as price increase, supply increase as well. And then if you can remember, if there's a change in price, it causes a movement along the demand curve, that we remain on the same curve and the price just moves up and down. Anything else causes a shift in the curve, then the curve moves inward or outwards. So, demand relationships, let me just see. Demand relationships. The first one we're going to look at is substitutes. Those are goods that can be used in the place of something else. And I try to use examples that we are currently, or that's currently in the news or currently in the market, in the forefront of the market. So I've used hand soap and hand sanitizer. So if we can't get hand soap, we are going to use hand sanitizer. And at the moment, everybody is opting for hand sanitizer because we feel that it is safer than just using normal hand soap. Am I right? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
These are the two graphs that I've got. So we look at hand soap first. Can you see the cursor moving on the graph, on the graphs? The black lines are the original demand curve. Okay, the black lines are the original demand curve. So we've got our quantity and the price of the original demand for that product. But now, as I've said, the demand for the product is decreasing. So demand moves upward because our new quantity, we've got less. There's a decrease in the demand for quantity. But because there's a decrease in the demand for quantity, there is an increase in the price of that. Because businesses are now supplying less, so they need to charge more to recover the same amount of money for that product. And if you know, if you look in the shops, how the prices have changed. increased over the last couple of weeks. But, so as the demand for hand soap decreases, the supply also decreases, and that leads to an increase in price. But now if we look at hand sanitizer, okay, that's our original, the black lines are the original demand curve. Okay. So the demand for hand sanitizer has increased. We are moving, or the curve is moving outwards. Okay. So demand has increased, there's a new quantity, we are demanding more. But because of that, the price of that product is also increasing. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so as demand of hand soap decreases, supply decreases, which leads to an increase in price. As demand for hand sanitizer increase, it leads to an increase in supply and therefore an increase in price. So we say that there is a positive relationship between the price of, there is a positive relationship between the price of a product and the demand for its substitute. Because if the price of the one goes up, demand for that product decreases, but the substitute increases. Okay, so if we look at the original product, the demand for that product decreases. Because demand is decreasing, supply of that product is also decreasing. And if supply decreases, they need to charge more for the product to still make the same amount of money. So let's say they charge 10 Rand for a bottle of hand soap. Okay. They sold 10 bottles of hand soap, so they made 100 Rand. Now they're only selling 5 bottles of hand soap, but they still need to make 100 Rand to survive. So they have to increase the price of the hand soap so that they can still make 100 Rand. But now the price is getting more, so people are rather buying the substitute. Okay. But because there's more demand for the substitute now, there's going to be higher supply of that substitute, because that business now, instead of making 1 bottle of hand sanitizer, they need to make 5 bottles of hand sanitizer. And then we get that if the price of the supply increases, the price of that product increases as well. If you compare the price of hand sanitizer now to what it was before this whole pandemic struck, okay, it's almost double the price because there's a bigger demand for it. Can I move on?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So the next one. There. My computer decides it wants to work. Okay, complements. Goods that are used together or that are in some way connected to each other. I use the example of cell phone and airtime. So we've got the 2 graphs again. We're looking at cell phones first. Okay. The black lines are the original demand and supply of cell phones. But now technology has made cell phones a lot cheaper than it used to be. So what is going to happen to the demand for cell phones? The demand is going to increase. See the demand line. Okay. The demand is going to increase because people are more able to afford cell phones now. But because the demand is increasing, supply has to increase as well. So supply is increasing, which leads to a decrease in the price of the product. So the more cell phone, or the cheaper the cell phones, the more people want to buy cell phones, the more cell phones they will need to manufacture. But we can't use our cell phones without airtime. So if the demand for cell phones increases, the demand for airtime is also going to increase. And because people need to buy airtime regardless, the price of that is going to increase as well. So if the complement is getting cheaper, or the one product is getting cheaper, the complement will increase in price. Okay, so cell phones are getting cheaper, so there's bigger demand for that, there's bigger supply of that, which leads to an increase in, a decrease in price. The complement is airtime, so if there's an increase in cell phones, there must be an increase in the demand for airtime as well. And they know that they can't use the cell phone without the airtime, so they're charging more for the airtime. So we say that is a negative impact, because the one product is getting cheaper, but the other product, the complement, is getting more expensive. That's a negative relationship. Any questions? Okay, then we go on to the supply relationships. Okay, substitutes, supply relationships. Substitutes, again, things that we use instead of something else. So I've used the example of takeaways and pre-cooked meals. We're no longer able to buy takeaways. So what happened to the supply of pre-cooked meals at Checkers, for instance? Okay. So if we look at the first graph, there's the original supply, okay, and the original demand. But now we are unable to buy that product. So the demand for that product, or the supply of that product, has decreased. And therefore the demand for that product has decreased. Okay, we still want to buy it, but we can't, so there's no demand for takeaways at the moment. And that leads to a decrease in the price of that product as well. But the substitute, pre-cooked meals. Okay, so people are still lazy, we still want an easy way out. So the demand for pre-cooked meals has increased. And because there's bigger demand for that product, the supply of that product has increased as well. But this leads to a decrease in the price of the product, because they no longer need to sell 5 meals at 10 Rand to make 50 Rand. They can sell 20 meals at what, 2.50 Rand to make 50 Rand. Because there's a bigger demand for the product. Okay, so if the demand for, or the supply of the original product decreases, there's a decrease in the demand for that product and a decrease in the price of that product. A substitute, on the other hand, the demand for that increases and the supply of that product will increase, and that leads to a decrease in the price. Okay, it's getting cheaper. Okay, and then the complements, crude oil and petrol. Complements are not necessarily things that need to be used together. It can be one product that is a byproduct of the original product. Okay, so we use crude oil to manufacture petrol. And if you followed the news over the last couple of weeks, you would have seen that there was a huge drop in the price of oil. Demand for oil has decreased because people are not driving around. So we've got our original demand and supply curve, okay? But the supply of crude oil has decreased, which led to a decrease in demand and therefore a decrease in the price of the product. The complement, petrol, because they are manufacturing petrol from crude oil, the supply of that product will also decrease. Because they're not they're not using crude oil to manufacture products. So the demand for petrol has decreased as well. And if demand decreases, price increases. Okay, so the demand for the product has decreased, supply of that product has decreased, but it has led to an increase in price of that product. Okay, so just think about it. Think about those numbers I gave you. If we demand a specific product and our demand increases, okay, so our demand for hand sanitizer increases, something else is going to lose out. So the demand for hand soap is going to decrease. But it's going to lead to an increase in price because people are buying the hand sanitizer and the businesses can charge whatever they want. If we look at the complements, if airtime or if cell phones becomes cheaper, more people are going to buy cell phones. But we need airtime with the cell phones, so there's going to be an increase in the purchase of airtime. If we look at supply relationships, if there's a decrease in the supply of product, remember that's from the business perspective, not from consumers. If businesses are offering fewer takeaways, people need to find an alternative. So they're going to buy more pre-cooked meals at Checkers, for instance. If the price of or the supply of a complementary product increases, the demand for that or the supply of that complementary product is going to increase as well. Okay. Any questions, you guys? Is it Ayanda, Lesedi, and Sinomusi? Sinomusi, have you got any questions?
No, ma'am.
Okay, Ayanda, have you got any questions?
No, ma'am.
Lesedi?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Is there anything else that I need to explain to you? If you want to, you need to be able to explain this with graphs. And like I said, I'll put this up on the Google Classroom as well, these PowerPoints with the arrows and the changes in the curves or the graphs, so that you can have a look at that and work through that as well. And then if you've got any questions, please, please, please ask. Okay. Write me a letter or a note on Google Classroom, and then we'll answer those questions for you. Yeah, but look at the examples and try to make it relevant to you. So use something that you can easily identify with. And that's why I try to use the COVID things, that basically what is happening in our markets at this moment, to see if you can make it more relevant and more current, so to say. Good. If you guys don't have any questions, or if you don't want me to explain anything more, then you're free to go if you want to. The markets, the perfect markets, imperfect markets, those are just work that you need to study.
Okay.
We did it in grade 10 as well. It's just study work. What are perfect markets? What are imperfect markets? Okay. Then if you are ready, or if you're finished and you don't have any more questions, then we can log off if that's fine with you. It's so nice chatting to all of you.
Ma'am?
Yes, Ayanda.
Ma'am, have you already explained the relationship between the goods and factor markets?
No, I showed them the exam guidelines. You do not need to know the graphs on how those two markets interrelate. But if you think about the factor market, that's where we sell the services of the factors of production, labor, capital, entrepreneurship, raw materials, and then the goods market,
Yes.
the goods and services. If we think about this whole situation where we're in now, okay, restaurants, there's a drop in demand for labor. So what is happening to the goods and services that they are offering? If businesses don't want employees, they won't be able to manufacture goods and services.
Yes.
So that's the relationship between those two things. If there's a decrease in the factor market, it usually leads to a decrease in the goods market, or let's say they are using farm workers on farms. So the wages of farm workers are getting more expensive. Farmers can't compete with that, or they can't continue to pay for them. So there's going to be a decrease in the labor that they supply, because they're not going to employ as many farm workers anymore. But something needs to replace those farm workers. So farmers are going to buy more technology, goods and services to replace those farm workers. So a shift in the one can lead to an increase or a decrease in the other market. Yeah.
Okay.
And if, what do we call it? What can we use as an example? What those things, earphones or Walkmans, if they're no longer sold in the goods market, then the employees that were making that is no longer needed in the factor market. So a decrease in the demand for goods in the goods market can lead to a decrease in the demand for services in the factor market.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure, Ayanda. Hope you are doing well.
I'm trying.
But ask questions, and if you don't understand or if you're unsure about something.
Okay.
Okay. But have a good day and good luck. The minister is talking at the moment about when schools are going to reopen. Tomorrow is the final briefing of the media and stakeholders. So by tomorrow, we'll know when schools are going to start again.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. But I'll let you guys know. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, Ayanda.
Bye, ma'am.